Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
So as we come to Christmas season 2017, we have to admit that we have been through some rough history recently. In the last 18 months, we've seen an absolutely tumultuous presidential election. We've seen a tumultuous first year of a presidency. We've seen grievous international events, great suffering, great pain. It's just been a bombardment of the soul. And I have to tell you that whether you're a Christian or not, of course I am, and make that very plain in these podcasts, but whether you're a Christian or not, the Christmas season is a great time to let, at least at even the most secular level, the humanity, the warmth, the love, the graciousness, the historic themes of the Christmas season wash over you. And of course, if you're a Christian, all the more important that you let the reason for the season, the meaning of it all, to be reborn in your heart. I want to recommend some things that I urge you to take in over the Christmas season. First of all, let me recommend some movies that I watch every Christmas season. My favorite Christmas movie is an unusual one. It's called Joyeux Noel, Joyeux, first word, Noel. And it is basically, that means Merry Christmas in French, for those of you waiting for a translation. And it's an interesting story about a historic event that happened at the first Christmas of World War I. Remember that this was largely a European war. And on Christmas Eve, 1914, troops from France, from Germany, and from England were in the trenches, arrayed against each other. But these were all countries that at that time were pretty strongly Christian. Now, there's a question as to why they were at war with each other if they were Christian and believed in Christian values, but that's one of the judgments that history has to make. But the fact is that on Christmas Eve 1914, these three Christian nations were at war. And something very unusual happened. While they should have been bombarding each other, should have been killing each other, should have been avowed enemies, the Christmas spirit prevailed, and something pretty touching, pretty human, pretty warm took place. This movie captures it. Even though you may not have heard of this movie, it was awarded an Academy Award, a Golden Globe, and it was a nominee for Best Foreign Film. I need to warn you that it does have captions at the bottom. It does have subtitles. Some of us don't like that, but I grew up in Germany. I grew up watching films that are subtitled. It doesn't bother me. I love this film. Christmas for me is associated a bit with military things. It's associated with the song "I'll Be Home for Christmas" and those themes of people being away from each other and off at war during Christmas time. I was raised a military brat, was away from my father for 2 or 3 Christmases of my youth, and lived among people who were away from home in Germany, away from the States. So these themes really touch me, and this film really touches me because it reminds us of what might be possible during war. It reminds us of what might be possible for faith and its influence. It reminds us of what humanity might mean. And I think it's interesting that it comes, the story is told about the first Christmas of World War I, right at pretty much the beginning of our last century. So that's the movie I most enjoy. The second one will not be a surprise to you. I love Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. I love Jimmy Stewart. I love the story. I love the way it depicts an era. I watch it every Christmas. I really enjoy it. And I want to urge you, this Christmas, watch this with your family and friends and take a moment to discuss the central imaginative theme of the film, which is what would it mean, what impact would it have if you had never existed? That's the question that's being asked of the central character, so powerful, played by James Stewart. And I wonder what it might mean in your life. Look at your life. Look at the lives of those in your family. Ask the question, what would it mean if I didn't exist? What would be different? Am I making any difference? Am I impacting any lives? If I didn't exist, would the world be better or worse, or would there be no change at all? It's an important, interesting thing to ask, I think. And this film prompts it, and prompts it beautifully. Now, the other film that I watch every Christmas, you can imagine what it is A Christmas Carol, based on the great Charles Dickens novel. Now, I like an older one. I like the one by starring Alastair Sim. Some of you won't even know who he is. This is one from, I believe, the 1930s. I might be wrong, might be a little early on that, but love it, love it, love it. But whatever version you like, watch A Christmas Carol. It has great themes. It asks great questions. It presses issues of humanity upon us, and it's just a great romp. Now, while I'm mentioning those three films, I also want to urge you to consider some books. And of course, given that it's the Christmas season, I strongly urge that you read the first couple of chapters of the Gospel of Luke. Even if you're not a Bible reader, even if you're not a believer in anything, even if you're not a Christian, this is really the mandate for the season. It's the story that gives rise to the season. Don't you think you ought to read it in its original form? Don't you think you ought to read it unadulterated? So find a fairly contemporary translation of the Bible, the New International Version or Modern English or something of that nature, and read the first couple of chapters of the book of Luke. If you want to read a bit more, you can read the first couple of chapters of the book of Matthew. This will give you the Christmas story as it comes to us from Scripture. There's another book that I read every year, and it is the one that gave rise to one of my favorite films. I read Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol every year. It's short. I usually can read it in a couple of evenings. I find the language beautiful. I find the questions that it presses upon us to be beautiful. And of course, you may know that as I'm saying these words, there's a movie out called The Man Who Invented Christmas. And it's all about Dickens and how he came to write A Christmas Carol and how it kind of revved up Christmas when it was falling out of fashion. And I think it's all wonderful. By the way, that film is based on a book by the same title, The Man Who Invented Christmas. And I'm actually reading that now. So strongly recommend that you read A Christmas Carol. And there's one other book that I really enjoy at Christmas time. Want to recommend it to you. Again, it's short. I realize that recommending long books for Christmas reading is pretty nuts, but it's called In the Dark Streets Shineth. It's an unusual little book, still available on Amazon, narrated by David McCullough, and it's a combination of two or three things. First of all, it's an account of the 1941 Christmas Eve addresses to the nation by Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill at the White House. You may know that as World War II broke out, Prime Minister Churchill visited President Roosevelt. They both made speeches to the nation, very powerful. So it's an account of those speeches. It's also a short history of two songs that came to define much of the Christmas experience in America at that time, O Little Town of Bethlehem and I'll Be Home for Christmas. And by the way, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir actually sings these songs in a CD that is that accompanies the book. There's a photo album of Americans at Christmas. It's just a great romp, remembering 1941, remembering Churchill and Roosevelt and their words to the world at that critical time of our history. And it's also a bit of a background about a couple of songs that, for me anyway, have really come to define the nature of Christmas and the experience of Christmas. Strongly recommend it. Beautifully narrated by David McCullough. Fun thing to gather the family for. Little $8, $9 book. I think you'll enjoy it. So these are some things that I recommend, but mainly what I'm trying to say to you is this Christmas, especially this Christmas, slow down a little bit. Maybe don't watch quite so much news. Maybe spend a little bit more time feeding on some things that are noble and sweet and historic and filled with heritage and filled with the meaning of Christmas. I strongly recommend Joyeux Noel, the movie about Christmas Eve in 1914 in the trenches of World War I. Strongly recommend It's a Wonderful Life. Strongly recommend A Christmas Carol, the movie, my favorite being Alastair Sim. And then really three little bits of reading I think will make a difference for you. First couple of chapters of the Gospel of Luke in the New Testament. You might also throw in first couple of chapters of the Gospel of Matthew. And then also A Christmas Carol, the book by Charles Dickens. Short, easy to read, easy to digest, very moving, very challenging. And then a kind of an odd book, In the Dark Streets Shineth. A little collection of some history, some speeches, some photographs, some music, but it all works and it will change your Christmas celebration.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator on Fox and CNN. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.